Aspire, how are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
I am fine also. So this is the round two or take two of the first Expats podcast. We tried to do one earlier, but there was too many gaffes, too many goofs for it to be for me not to be embarrassed publishing it. So hopefully this will go a little bit better. All right. So who are the expats? You, my dear listeners, might be asking. Expats, we are an informal group of expats or foreigners who came to live in Poland, but not only foreigners. In some situations, some of us actually are Polish, but we've lived most of our lives abroad. So we're a loose collection of foreigners and
With
foreign
and
Poles.
without Polish family roots.
Yes, who live in Poland because it is a beacon of sanity from away from liberalism, cultural Marxism, and all this other retardation that has engulfed the countries that we come from.
Can say that again.
Yeah. So we love it here. We've come to culturally enrich Poland in a non-ironic way. And we want to provide you guys with our take of what's happening in Poland, but also what's happening in our home countries. So in this case, that'll be America and Australia. So, Aspire, maybe you can give a few words about yourself.
Well, I came here to indeed escape the political madness of the area where I come from, which is Portland, Oregon, which is a hotbed for liberal ideologies and just the cancerous cultural Marxism that is gripping the West. I'm so happy to escape that land. Other than, boy, I miss the food and the craft beer, but it is quite wonderful being here in Poland amongst many conservatives. It has been quite a comfortable transition.
Yeah, well, as liberals like to tell us, it's really the food that matters. So honestly, I'm not sure if your transaction was a worthwhile one. So a similar story. I guess unlike you, I've got a little bit more Polish heritage, but certainly I came for similar reasons. All right, so let's get straight into it. We're going to talk about a number of topics today, and I want to keep this within a certain time limit. So let's talk about this law, this so-called Holocaust denial law, this Polish death camps law. Yeah.
Absolute
Um,
insanity.
yeah, so let's give a bit of a rundown. What's your understanding of this law? How would you describe what this law is about?
So, from a complete outsider's perspective, and looking at this, it just seems like Poles are trying to correct, this historical, what would you say,
Misconception.
yeah, and
Yeah.
calling them Polish death camps is it's absolutely crazy. Um, Obviously, the Poles were not running these death camps. Obviously, the Poles didn't contribute to moving masses of Jews to these death camps, and I mean these are also fellow Poles going to these camps. This is just complete madness.
Yeah, I think I'll give a bit of a background to this law. Essentially, it's a little bit stupid because it's a bit of a matter of semantics. Yeah, it's this
Right.
term Holocaust. Sorry, not Holocaust. Polish death camp or Polish concentration camp. It gives the impression that these were run by Poles or that Poles somehow had a these were organized or run by Poles or whatever, and this is obviously not the case. Auschwitz
Exactly.
was originally built to intern Poles, and so this is the main dispute, if you will. But it goes a little bit further than that because it also plays the role of, I guess you could say, it's kind of like an inversion of Holocaust denial laws, whereas Holocaust denial laws prevent you from denying that something which did take place. Let me put it another way. Holocaust denial laws, they prevent you from saying that something which did happen didn't, in this case, these laws are meant to prevent you from saying something that didn't happen did. So you're not allowed to place the blame on Poland for the Holocaust as a whole.
And it makes perfect sense that that Poland is passing this law. But what doesn't make sense and what is the madness that I was referring to is the reaction from Jewish society and Israel, which you're about to get into.
Yeah, well, it's
Not trying to steal your thunder there. Yeah.
no, not at all. I mean, the reaction is it's basically we can see why the Jews had this word chutzpah. Yeah, I mean, we are hearing now, and I agree with this to an extent that this is okay. Let's say in theory, this could stifle free speech. Okay. Fair enough, but it's a little bit ironic that they are now standing up for free speech, considering what happens if you say other things about certain historical events, which we won't go into right now, but I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. So it's insanely hypocritical to all of a sudden,
Absolutely.
yeah, start crying these crocodile tears and pretending to be, concerned about more free speech.
Hmm.
And it's pretty obvious why. This is these events have been very. I don't want to sound too cynical, but Israel is able to use this for their benefit. Yeah, they've received billions of dollars in reparations from Germany, some other countries too, I guess. And there are also disputes with Poland over some financial matters. So I think that it's a matter of following the money, but it's also that they've in a certain sense they've weaponized this. Yeah, they
Yeah,
could
this
use this
does.
to defend them, to deflect any sort of criticism against their community or against Israel a lot of the time. I guess I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely, and I would play it up that I mean that yeah, this is playing right into their hands because right now in the United States there has been a law. I need to bring it up, but it's and I will bring it up later in the show that is that they're trying to pass this law that brings back that gives back billions of dollars worth of land to maybe family members
Yes.
who lived in Poland, who left and left the land abandoned and was I guess confiscated by the state of Poland. Um, and
Yes.
and this could be huge. I mean, this land is now worth billions of dollars, and so it makes perfect sense that they're trying to play this up at this point in time.
That's right, but I think I have to say, I didn't vote for the Law and Justice Party. And say what you will about them, they've been pretty steadfast in this. They have said some things which need to be said. Morawiecki, our prime minister, he was confronted in Munich by somebody who was apparently the descendant of Holocaust survivors. And I mean, okay, fair enough. Yeah, this guy, looks like his family suffered terribly. Okay, but Morawiecki, he stood firm. He said, "No, you won't be, arrested for saying, the truth." Yeah, what we don't want is people saying that, Poland as a whole is to blame for these things that happen. And he and some other members of the government uh, have mentioned that there were Jewish collaborators with the Nazis, and that's an undeniable fact. Yeah,
Absolutely.
there were the Kappa, the guards in the concentration camps. These were Jews that essentially sold out their own Jews. And there are other examples, but in Israel, they actually had trials for the Kappa, and some of them were given life sentences because they sold out their own kind. They put themselves ahead of the pack, and yeah, so there's nothing historically inaccurate about what they're saying. Now, what we also spoke about previously is this idea of condemning a whole nation. Okay, so this is something that the left they love to ascribe this sense of collective guilt, which is, I think, quite ironic because this idea of collective guilt, I think, is a very Christian one, and the left are generally non-religious. So in Christianity, you have the idea of the original sin of Adam and Eve taking the fruit from the Garden of Eden. And for this, all of mankind is punished, and we have a similar theme happening with leftist ideologies, where if your ancestors or somebody from your race, your religion, your ethnicity, nationality, whatever, if they did something wrong in the past to another group, a group that can be labeled an oppressed group, then they will ascribe the guilt of this to the entire group. Now, as an American, you are well aware of this. I'm also well aware of this. This is happening in Australia as well, in many different ways. And it's okay to say, it's politically correct to say that Poles or Germans, they murdered lots of Jews. They were anti-Semitic. They were anti-Jewish, whatever. And it's true that there were pogroms that were committed by Poles. There was Jawadne, which is the most well-known one, but it's not the only one, where Poles murdered their Jewish neighbors. That is true, okay? Nobody denies that. It's certainly not going to be illegal to talk about that. And this kvetching about supposedly stifling free speech and denying the Holocaust is just ridiculous. But when I was at a protest coordinated by some of the nationalist groups outside of the presidential palace, actually it would be incorrect to call it a protest, because it was actually a demonstration in favor of this law. The leader of Ruch Narodowy, the national movement, the nationalist party that we have here, he actually went a step further. He not only spoke about the collaboration with the Germans, he actually mentioned something which is equally true, which is that the Jews largely collaborated with the Soviets.
Indeed.
They collaborated with the Soviets when they invaded, during the war, and then also after the war. They were overrepresented in the state security services, Urząd Bezpieczeństwa. So now we don't collectively hold the Jews accountable for this. We like you and me, we both know that there were many Jews involved in Russian communism, but also communism in the States, and of course in Eastern Europe. And you cannot say that. I mean, it's not politically correct to say that Jews were collectively responsible for this. I mean, what do you think would happen in America if somebody said this?
Absolutely. I mean, there would be outrage. But I mean, one cannot say that Marxism or communism would, or Bolshevism would exist without the Jews.
Well, yeah, I mean, Karl Marx, he was a Jew, and many of the leading old Bolsheviks, they were also Jews. But at the end of the day, it was the Russian foot soldiers that made it possible. But we can't deny that there were many Jews involved in the in these movements. So I think it's brave of Mr. Vinitsky to mention this, and I think that the Jewish overreaction to this. I think that this is going to come back to bite them, because now we have heads of state saying that the Jews were partially responsible for these things that happen, and will also bring to light other historical events which are not known, which is the collaboration with the Soviet forces. And just to give a bit of a guide to our listeners who might not be so aware of this, I'm holding in my hand a book called Poland's Holocaust by Polish-American historian Tadeusz Piotrkowski. And I've noticed that some of the Polish historians that now reside in America, they're actually quite red-pilled on this matter, and Mr. Piotrkowski is no example. Sorry, no exception. This book goes over the major nationalities that lived in Poland during the time of World War II, and also just before and after. And he talks about how each of the groups collaborated or resisted against the occupying powers. So we're talking about the Germans and the Soviets during this time. And he has a pretty extensive collection of accounts of Jewish collaboration. And because talking about the capo is, I think, a little bit less controversial. I'm going to focus on the Soviet aspect. So I'm just having a look at a few passages here. So, for example, a statement attached to a 1940 report to London reads, "The Jews welcomed the Soviet armies enthusiastically last September. The Jewish proletariat continues not to be ill-disposed to the Bolsheviks and to be ill-disposed to Poland. However, the Jewish middle class and the intelligentsia are as oppressed as the Poles. These Jews say that they'd rather be beaten regularly by the Germans morning, noon, and night than bear the completely irregular oppression of the Soviets." Okay, so we know that the Jews, they didn't all welcome the Soviets. There was also anti-Jewish persecution to some extent by the Soviets, especially against religious communities. But there was still many Jews which welcomed the Soviets with open arms, and of course the Poles didn't. For them it was just another invading army. Okay. Let's have a look at another one. Okay, so Jan Stanchik, a socialist, who we can't really say that he's an anti-Semite, said of the stated in 1943, "I do not want to hide it and admit that among the people who returned from Russia as well as in the army, there is an anti-Semitic frame of mind. I confess this with a heavy heart, but one cannot remedy this by an order. The reason for all of this lies in the fact that the Bolsheviks came to Poland. When the Bolsheviks came to Poland, the Jewish militiamen walked around with lists and pointed out those to be deported from among the Poles. Therefore, it seems to every Pole that were it not for the Jewish militiamen, he would have been able to remain at home on his farm." Okay, all right. Let's have a look at another one. Here we have Alexander Watt, a Polish pre-war communist author of Jewish origin, describing the situation in Lvov, which is now Lviv in Ukraine, used to be Polish city. At that time, however, the Jews constituted a certain class, not the ruling class, but a well-placed one in Russia. In Lvov, there were jailers, denouncers, quite a few Jewish denouncers, a very large number. Jews were more inclined to cooperate with the Soviet authorities. Many pre-war communists appeared on the scene like mushrooms after a rain. And the pre-war communists, for the most part, were Jews. Okay. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not assigning blame to the Jews, okay? But if we take this morality, that you are collectively responsible for what your ancestors did, for what your co-ethnics, co-nationals did, then we also have to look at the things that the Jews did. And the fact of the matter is that Poland had been a very tolerant country. Yes, there were pogroms. Yeah, there were laws against Jews to some extent, but there was never this massive expulsion of Jews like there was from other countries. And one other thing which I'll mention before we finish on this topic is the fact that, like I mentioned previously, the state security services were heavily overrepresented with the Jews. Some of the most prominent members were Roman Romanowski, Jakob Berman. He was the head of this Ministry of Security. But there were many other judges, such as Stefan Michnik, Zygmunt Weiselberg, Solomon Morel, or Shlomo Morel, as he's sometimes known, Helena Wolinska, Józef Różański, Alexander Warecki, and many more. And according to the IPN, which is a Polish organization for national memory, according to them, about 37% of these functionaries were of Jewish origin, and this is at a time where about 1% of the population of Poland was Jewish. So, Asper, you got anything else to contribute to this matter?
Well, I just wanted to add about the Jews welcoming the Soviets into Eastern Europe, and it might have something to do with the establishment of a Jewish autonomous state, the Jewish Autonomous Oblast, which still exists to this day in Russia. This was established in May 7th, 1934, and it may give reason to why the Jews were so open to, or why some of the Jews were so open to welcoming the Soviet invaders.
I would say that that's part of it. The Jews really were a mixed bag when it came to their motivations, because you had some who you could say that they were genuine communists. Like, they really wanted to abolish the concept of nationality, and they didn't care much for their Jewish nationality either. I would say that Trotsky might be a good example of this, as his second wife was not Jewish. His first one was, but his second one wasn't, and he did not raise his children as Jews. He had them raised Lutheran, actually, if I remember correctly, and he didn't much care for the idea of a Jewish homeland. So some of them, I believe, were sincere communists. Of course, it doesn't detract from the crimes that were committed by them, and as we can see here, there were also some Jewish socialists and communists who saw this as a way to forward their plans for a homeland, autonomous homeland of some sort, be it in Russia or be it elsewhere.
And just among those names, another character of interest I'd just like to add to that list is one Vasily Blokin, and I'm sure I may have butchered his last name there, but he is known to have personally executed, he holds the record for personal executions, and his family is of Jewish origin, and he personally murdered around 7,000 Polish prisoners. Uh, Supposedly during the Katyn massacre, and I think many of our Polish audience knows much about the Katyn massacre, and how long the truth about that took to come out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of our great national tragedies. This is what happens when you have communism, is that they'll try to decapitate the nation, to kill off the elite, to kill off people with leadership qualities, intellectuals, and this was the point of this massacre. So yeah, it was a great tragedy, and Stalin, even though he himself, he had a dubious relationship with the Jews, the fact is that he trusted Jews more when it came to running countries which he would make his client states, because they were less inclined to have loyalty to these countries. Yeah, I mean, if you're an ethnic Pole, and then you have some sort of attachment to the land, but if you're like a Jew, then okay, maybe you lived in Poland previously. Before that, you were kicked out from some other country, and before that, it was somewhere else. So this is understandable. This is what the colonial powers did in the Middle East. Yeah, they would take ethnic minorities, religious minorities like Alawites in Syria, for example, and we still see the effects of that today. Um, Bashir al-Assad being of this group. So it's nothing unusual. It's nothing that should be surprising. But we have to talk about that these things happened.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. So we'll talk about one other aspect of Polish news before we move on to our the lands that we fled from. Let's talk about the cursed soldiers, the żołnierze wyklęci. Okay, so when I was younger, I was under the impression that World War II ended after the Japanese surrender, or in Europe it ended after the German surrender. I did not know that people in Eastern Europe, that soldiers continued to fight for quite a while after the official after the war ended officially. Yeah, but actually, in fact, there were quite okay. Go. Yeah. There were armed conflicts in Lithuania, resistance in Ukraine, right, so and in other countries unknown to many of our English speakers, English speaking audience. There was some resistance to the communist governments immediately after World War II, and even up until the 50s, although in most situations it dissipated for the most part after about 1947. But there were many partisan groups which continued to conduct small-scale assaults against the Polish collaborators, but also the NKVD and other communist forces. One of these groups, for example, was the Freedom and Independence, or Wolność I Niezawisłość. This was a partisan group which continued up until about 1952, although, like I mentioned, most of their activities, most of their major activities ceased after around 1947. Okay, so last Thursday we had the march with some of the nationalist groups, including Ruch Narodowy, Młodzież Polska, and Obóz Narodowy Radykalny. I think from now on I'll just give you the English translations for those. So that's the National Movement, All Polish Youth, and the National Radical Camp. These three groups are the main organizers of most of these marches, most of these protests. And this time it was a little bit different, because ever since I came here, we haven't really had much leftist opposition to our marches. Now, this has changed in the last year or so. We're seeing, and I hate to say it, but we are seeing somewhat smaller marches and demonstrations by the nationalists, I think. And we are seeing leftist marches, demonstrations, counter protests. They're starting to exist, and they never used to exist. So this is somewhat concerning, but not really, because when I see the people that protest, these Antifa groups, these other leftist degenerates, they are for the most part your typical 4 foot something beta male, people that look like they have some sort of crippling diseases, obese women with pink hair. What's that?
Basement dwellers.
Basement dwellers, yeah, just all the usual freaks, and surprisingly some boomers. So it looks like the boomer question is a question which we face in Poland as well. And I suspect, though I cannot prove this just yet, that a lot of these people were probably sympathizers with the communist regime. There were tens of thousands of informants, collaborators, up until the very end of communism. So I think that these people have some sort of personal stake in this. And this kind of ties into what I was saying earlier, because you might think, why would these people protest this? Why would you protest the celebration, the honoring of people who fought against communism, who fought for Poland, for freedom, even when all hope was lost. And these leftists, they bring up certain things that, for example, some partisan was responsible for the killing of some civilians, or there was some incidents of anti-Semitism or something like that. And there is truth to this, but the thing is, they take these few incidences and they smear the entire label of the cursed soldiers, of the żołnierze wyklęci, with these labels of murderers, bandits, rapists, Nazi collaborators, whatever they can muster. And this is this repeating theme of leftists not wanting anybody to be proud of their heritage. So if you're a Pole, you cannot be proud of being a Pole, because some Poles were involved in pogroms, or some Poles were anti-Jewish, or something else. And likewise, these heroes, we cannot celebrate them, because just like with in America, you had slavery, and we also have these incidences which make it impossible for us to be proud of our heritage. But I think it's a very good thing that they're coming out to protest, because when the average person sees this, the average Pole is very proud of our history and of what happened in World War II. Polish bravery, the saving of Jews, and also the resistance to communism even after the war was over. And they'll see this, and they'll see these leftist degenerates, and I think that this will bring more people to our ranks, because these people they offer you guilt, they offer you self-hatred, and we offer them pride, we offer them remembrance and honor of their history, of our history, and I think for that reason we'll win. Aspire, what's your take on this whole thing?
Well, especially, I mean, these are who they are protesting against are the members of society who wanted to provide Poland a future. And again, I mean, I was about to chime in and say, yeah, I think this is a good thing. I mean, where it wasn't seen before, it's cropping up now, and maybe of course, the left, are just the victim cry bullies who they're not getting their way, and they're going to go and express themselves in some of the worst manners possible. And so this, I think, will only serve to strengthen the cause. And as you mentioned, that there weren't as many nationalists at this march and at maybe some other marches.
I'd like
Is
to point
because
out that it was about minus 15 degrees, so that's probably part of the reason.
yeah, it's also freezing here right now. But that the what's the word? The passiveness to the threat of these social Marxists or these leftist SJWs didn't really exist before, and now that it's showing up, certainly it's going to spark maybe something more in people who are not so politically engaged
Yeah.
after seeing something like that.
Yeah, it's just like when you had the leftists and the usual coalition of the oppressed trying to take down your Confederate flags, your Confederate statues. I mean, whether or not, I mean, obviously nobody now agrees with the slavery, I think, but this is part of people's heritage, and you can't just continue attacking people's heritage and expect them not to react at some point. And I think what they're going to lead to is a very negative, possibly violent reaction. Um, and obviously we hope that it doesn't come to that. But these people, they could keep pushing, and they don't know when to stop. And the other thing that I'll bring up is, I mean, you look at these people that attend these protests, and I mean, we're all familiar with the quintessential, the stereotype of the SJW. Either some really effeminate, possibly gay man, in quotation marks. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
because man, you don't want.
well, yeah,
I'm registered female.
we don't know what gender they identify as. It could be
Yeah.
or Z identifies as.
Yes.
But some very effeminate male, let's say, or some obese woman, who no man would want anything to do with, or just other really defective individuals. And then you look at some of these people who were the cursed soldiers who continued to fight after the war had ended, and these were men better than me, better than you, much better than them. They're people that they will never ever be able to match in life. I mean, these are people who fought to the death for their country. And here we have people who've never known real suffering. They've
Absolutely.
never. I mean, Poland is, at least in the capitals, it's a relatively comfortable country. They've never known any danger. They've never known starvation. They've never known what it's like to really fight for something, unless it's in the form of screeching some social justice crap while you're surrounded by 20 police officers. Who are ensuring that you don't get your ass kicked.
Absolutely.
But yeah. Anyway, something funny occurred during this march. As usual, they come with they love the rainbow flags, even when there's no point in having them. So they bring these flags, and at some point during the march there was a let's say a transfer of ownership, and this flag ended up being trailed behind the car that was leading the march, so that it was constantly scraping against the ground. So that was a pretty enjoyable image. But to the credit of the person who was leading the march, he did say that this flag had been found, and for anybody to please come and claim it during, during the march. So that was quite amusing.
And did anyone claim it?
Not that I'm aware of. For some reason, I can't figure out why. But yeah, okay. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with these developments, whether these people will show up at future demonstrations that we have. But I think that they're really just being led into a trap. We're basically they're doing exactly what we want them to be doing, which is making idiots of themselves. And yeah. All right, let's move on to the countries that we fled from. So, as mentioned previously, me and Aspia are refugees seeking political asylum in Poland to some extent. Now, okay, what's going on in Australia? Let me first start this from the year 2005, I believe it was. There was a situation where a psychology professor, originally from Canada, but now living in Australia, he wrote a letter to a very small newspaper expressing his concern about the migration of black African immigrants to Australia, and he said that that he predicts that this will cause an increase in crime, dysfunctionality, that these people will become an underclass, and I'll link to the video later on because he was eventually the target of a character assassination where a TV show called A Current Affair, which is like this news program, they interviewed him, they rounded up like all the plus 100 IQ blacks to confront him, to show that, look at all these intelligent blacks, I mean, what the hell are you talking about? You was just a racist, all this sort of thing, and he lost his job. Okay, fast forward to 2018, or 2017 to be precise, because the article that I'm looking at is from 2017. And we can say that Professor Drew Fraser has been vindicated. There has been this this meme of African gangs, the Apex gang, which was mostly Sudanese, people of Sudanese origin, and these people, the police commissioner, the police has now been forced to admit that they are massively overrepresented in certain crimes. Now I'm looking at an article from the Herald Sun. Okay, so for example, we have Sudanese make up just 0.11% of Victoria's population, but 4.8% of aggravated burglary offenders. So that's a pretty massive overrepresentation, but there's others. For the same statistic, they are responsible for 7.44% of home invasions, 5.65% of car thefts, and 13.9% of aggravated robberies, and various other forms of cultural enrichment. Whether or not they are overrepresented in high IQ crimes such as insider trading, tax fraud, and that sort of thing, I am unaware. I suspect the answer is no. Okay, Aspir, what do you think? I mean, if you're an American 10 years ago, looking at your population, what things are like in America, I mean, could you not see that this would be the case?
Just 10 years ago.
Sorry?
Just 10 years
well,
ago.
we could go back at pretty much any time after, say, the 50s, and the answer would be quite similar.
Well, I mean, we have this complete hypocrisy in the United States media of portraying these such as the Black Lives, these communities or these SJW groups such as Black Lives Matter as being upstanding citizens of society and completely being just in their actions, and just like you had in Australia with these juveniles, quote unquote, or no, they were juveniles, young teenagers,
youths is the code word.
Attacking tourists and targeting white yeah, tourists visiting these beaches. And we've had the same thing in several cities, including New York, of course, that they just treat these as isolated incidents. And I mean, of course, whenever you have a BLM rally, um, oh, and I mean, we had actually the exact almost copycat scenario. I think it was taking place in New Jersey or Maryland or one of those East Coast states around the boardwalk area where black youths were attacking uh, white tourists or residents in the area and harassing them and just actually just shouting "Black Lives Matter,
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter,"
Yeah.
and basically able to get away with this with impunity. And this was, I think, over towards the end of the summer, or somewhere around the fall last year. And would I have seen this coming 10 years ago? Was that the question?
Yeah.
I would say, I would actually say no. I mean, it was just like it wasn't, race was not so much on the on the forefront of everyone's mind, and particularly not on my mind, especially just being in the type of environment that I was in, and living in what was mostly informally white communities. And I can say this, like, living in Portland has just been over the past 3 years that I was living there was inundated with Africans or African Americans from New Orleans after being displaced by the hurricane. I can't remember the name of that hurricane. And now we're receiving just thousands upon thousands of Africans and Arabs, and they're filling up entire neighborhoods. And it's not a multicultural mixing. I mean, of course, they're all segregating to their own communities, and yeah, and you just see this change. And of course, it matches with the crime rates. If I were to bring up a map of Portland right now, of course, you would see the downtown city center being one of them, but the crime rates in the given areas where these new inhabitants are segregating themselves to are where the highest crime rates are.
Well, in that case, you just got to take them out of that area, and
Right,
problem should be solved. Yeah.
But we got to stop whites from just wanting to be with their own people. We got to put them into their areas, right? And
yeah, I mean, this is the logic, right? But this is another example of how the left works. You know, just like when you have some Muslim bombing attack or whatever, some truck of tolerance incident.
those trucks of peace.
Yeah, trucks of peace, trucks of love. We have the same meme where the left says, "Oh, you know, these are the real victims are the Muslims, and we have to take care of the Muslims because somebody might look at them strange or something."
Right.
And this is the real tragedy in all of this, not
Which
the.
was even the sympathies after 9/11, and every time 9/11, it's always like, whoa, we got to protect these Muslims from people who might hate them.
Exactly, and it's the exact same story here. There was a video released by the Multicultural Commission, Victorian Multicultural Commission, which I'll link to, where this video was basically talking about how God, we really should learn to edit and just insert a clip, but until we get
In
to
the
that
future,
advanced,
once we get more of those shekels, I mean rubles.
yeah, yeah, to pay for our training.
Yes.
But until that happens, bear with me and just trying to imagine what I'm describing here. They show a Sudanese family, parents getting kids ready to school and saying, "Hey, these kids, usually parents look forward to the kids going back to school and learning, but this semester, this term, Sudanese parents are worried that their children may face discrimination, blah blah blah, and they're worried that they might face attack." And it's like, hey, pretty sure we should be afraid because they are not 44 times more likely to be the victims of certain crimes. Yeah,
Absolutely.
these crimes are directed at us.
You know, and if I was aware of the same statistics that I'm aware of now, certainly I would have a different view 10 years ago. If I can just bring this up very quickly, is a a statistic from 2008, and I can pull up this the source of this statistic in our next interview, but it comes from the United States government. I think the FBI actually, and no, no, actually, I might have a moment, and I can tell you where the statistic comes from exactly before we end this show. But in 2008, there was over 14,000 white, or I should say, European Americans raped by African Americans, and zero, zero, absolute zero reports of whites, European American on African American rapes. Incredible. 2008. And I will pull that up so you can keep talking, and then I will pull that up and mention where that comes from.
Well, slavery and
Oh, right.
Jim Crow. So
Oh,
that's
shit. Oh.
I really fail to see what your point is, but yeah, it's this continuing of looking at the offenders as the victims, and there was a protest recently against this labeling of Africans as these African gangs.
And facts are racist now.
Facts are racist
in Canada.
Statistics.
It's law. You can't bring up facts anymore in Canada.
But this is the complete lack of respect and courtesy that some of these immigrants have. You had this leader of the Sudanese community, and I'll post a video link to this as well, where he called for our Prime Minister and our Immigration Minister to be deported, purely because they mentioned that this is an issue. Yeah, so he's saying that, I don't care much for our Prime Minister or our Immigration Minister, but I mean, just the audacity of going to somebody else's country and calling for their government members to be deported is like, man, like, where is your gratitude? Seriously.
Absolutely. What kind of life did Australia build up for you?
Yeah, well, like I said, you get looked at strangely every now and again, but would you prefer that, or would you prefer going back to, in the words of Der Fuhrer Donald Trump, to your shithole country? So this is the question. Okay. Asper, you got anything else to add to this?
So I can give listeners the link to the statistic that I got this from. I will spell it out here, but I will definitely we will definitely include it in the description below. But that statistic is available at www.bjs.gov/content/pub/cvus08.pdf, and that's an HTTPS web link.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. So definitely check that out. All right, so on a finishing note, expats, we're going to be hopefully doing these podcasts regularly, but we're also trying to be active. We're trying to be activists, and we will be conducting a campaign to raise awareness of what's going on in South Africa at the moment. So we've printed off some stickers, and there'll be something else coming up shortly, which I don't want to give too much information about, but we will post the information as it comes. This is a really big thing, and we really need to raise awareness of this. Probably this will be the topic of our next cast. All right, cool. So that's about it. Signing off. Asper, it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.